Princess Dawn stood alone on her private balcony, watching the 3 moons of her homeworld rise into the purple evening sky. Her slender fingers, with their slight blue tint, gripped the crystal railing as she observed the busy life in the capital city below. Countless hovercrafts zipped between the towering spires, carrying people home after a long day's work. But unlike the bustling city beneath her, Dawn's royal chambers remained quiet and empty. She turned away from the view and caught her reflection in the polished wall. Her silver eyes, a mark of royal blood, stared back at her. While other females of her species had rough, scaled skin, Dawn's was smooth and shifted colors with her emotions, currently a deep blue of sadness. The scientists said this was part of her condition. "Your Highness," a female voice called from behind her, "the Emperor requests your presence in the Grand Hall." Dawn nodded to her attendant, Rose, one of the few people who could bear to stay near her for long periods. As she walked through the palace corridors, male servants and guards pressed themselves against the walls, their eyes glazed over as if she didn't exist. She'd grown used to this reaction over the years, but it still hurt. The Grand Hall sparkled with crystal chandeliers and holographic displays showing the vastness of their stellar empire. Her father, Emperor Bright, sat on his throne, his scaled skin gleaming with the traditional royal markings. Unlike other males, he could at least look at her, though she knew it caused him discomfort. "Dawn, my daughter," he said, his voice trained with effort. "The annual selection ceremony is approaching. I know the past 5 ceremonies have been unsuccessful, but we must try again." Dawn's skin rippled with patches of gray embarrassment. The selection ceremony was meant to help royal children find suitable mates from noble families. But for her, it had become an annual reminder of her isolation. Last year, 30 eligible males had been invited. All of them had walked right past her, as if she were invisible. "Father, perhaps we should skip it this year," Dawn suggested, keeping her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "The nobles are starting to talk. They say the royal bloodline is cursed." The Emperor rose from his throne, fighting against his biological urge to move away from her. "No, child. You are not cursed. Dr. Glow's research suggests your condition might have a greater purpose we don't yet understand." Dawn thought about the countless tests she'd undergone in the palace laboratories. Dr. Glow, the royal scientist, was the only one who seemed excited about her condition. She claimed Dawn's ability to make males unconsciously avoid her was too precise to be a mere genetic defect. "Your Majesty," a guard burst into the hall, then immediately staggered backward as he noticed Dawn. My apologies. Urgent news from the Space Command. We've detected an unknown vessel entering our system. The energy signature. It's unlike anything we've seen before." The Emperor's expression shifted from concern to intense focus. "Have they responded to our communication attempts?" "Yes, Your Majesty. They call themselves humans. They request permission to send diplomatic representatives." Dawn's skin flickered with swirls of bright yellow curiosity. In all her studies of known species, she'd never heard of humans. Perhaps these newcomers would provide a distraction from her upcoming ceremony. "Prepare for their arrival," the Emperor commanded. "Dawn, as first princess, you should be present for this historic moment. That is, if you feel ready." For the first time in months, Dawn felt her skin shift to a warm orange of hope. "Yes, Father. After all, how much worse could it be than another selection ceremony?" As she returned to her chambers that night, Dawn didn't realize that the arrival of these humans would change not just her life, but the entire understanding of why she was different. The stars twinkled through her window, and somewhere out there, a ship was carrying the answer to her lifelong isolation. The grand reception hall buzzed with excitement as hundreds of nobles gathered for the arrival of the human diplomatic team. Dawn stood beside her father's throne, her skin shifting between shades of green, a mix of nervousness and excitement. Unlike regular court gatherings, today the males of her species seemed too distracted by the upcoming event to notice their usual urge to avoid her. Through the tall windows, Everyone could see the human ship landing in the palace's diplomatic docking bay. It was small compared to their own vessels, with smooth white surfaces that reflected the morning sunlight. The whole room fell silent as the palace doors swung open. 5 humans entered the hall, walking in a neat line. Dawn studied them with fascination. They looked so different from her people. Their skin didn't change color, and they had no scales. Instead, they came in various shades of brown and pink, with soft-looking outer coverings they called clothes. The leader of the human group stepped forward and bowed. "Your Imperial Majesty, I am Ambassador White. On behalf of Earth and humanity, we thank you for this warm welcome." Dawn noticed that one of the younger humans was looking directly at her. He had dark hair and what humans would call green eyes, while every other male in the room unconsciously angled their bodies away from her. This human showed no sign of discomfort. The Emperor spoke, his voice carrying across the hall. "Welcome, Ambassador. We are pleased to begin this historic relationship between our peoples. May I present my daughter, First Princess Dawn." This was usually the most awkward part of any introduction. Males would nod vaguely in her direction, their eyes unfocused, before quickly moving on. But as the human group approached the throne, something different happened. The young human with green eyes stepped forward and smiled directly at her. "Your Highness, I'm James Thompson, Cultural Relations Officer." He bowed, maintaining eye contact the entire time. "Your city is beautiful. I've never seen architecture quite like it." Dawn's skin flashed bright yellow with surprise before she could control it. Her voice almost shook as she replied, "Thank you, Officer Thompson. You're very direct." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many of the nobles had never heard a male address the princess so clearly. Even Dr. Glow, who stood near the back of the hall, was frantically taking notes on her datapad. The formal introductions continued, but Dawn barely noticed them. She kept glancing at James, who seemed completely at ease in her presence. He even asked her a question about the crystal chandeliers, leading to several minutes of actual conversation, something she hadn't experienced with any male since childhood. After the ceremony, as servants prepared the diplomatic feast, Dawn overheard 2 noble ladies whispering. "Did you see that?" The human male spoke to her as if she were normal. Perhaps they're too primitive to sense the warning signals, or too simple-minded to understand them. Dawn's skin rippled with patches of gray embarrassment, but then she heard James's voice behind her. "Your Highness, I hope I'm not being too forward, but I noticed the way your skin changes color. Is that linked to emotions?" She turned to find him standing nearby, showing genuine interest rather than the usual avoidance. "Yes, it is, though most people try not to mention it directly." "Oh, I apologize if I caused offense," James said quickly. "On Earth, we believe in being direct about cultural differences. It helps avoid misunderstandings." For the first time in years, Dawn felt her skin shift to a warm, pleasant pink, the color of comfort. "No offense taken, Officer Thompson. In fact, it's refreshing." As they walked toward the feast hall together, Dawn noticed Dr. Glow watching them intensely. The old scientist's expression suggested she'd just discovered something important, but Dawn was too busy enjoying her first real conversation with a male in years to worry about it. What none of them realized was that this simple diplomatic meeting had just set in motion events that would change their 2 species forever. 3 days after the humans' arrival, Dawn paced in her private laboratory. Her skin flickered between orange excitement and purple worry as she waited. The door slid open, and James walked in, carrying a small device in his hands. "I hope I'm not late, Your Highness," he said with a smile. "Earth's definition of an hour is slightly different from yours." "Please, call me Dawn," she replied, her skin settling into a warm pink. "At least when we're working. These meetings aren't exactly official." They both knew they were breaking several royal protocols. Princesses weren't supposed to meet privately with foreign diplomats, and Dawn's father would worry about her spending time alone with any male, even one who seemed immune to her condition. But Dr. Glow had quietly arranged these research sessions, eager to understand why humans reacted differently. James placed his device on the table. This is a basic brain scanner from our medical kit. Would it help your research? Dawn moved closer, forgetting royal dignity in her excitement. Perfect. I've been comparing readings from our species, but I needed human data. She paused, her skin rippling with gray. That is, if you don't mind being a test subject. Not at all, James laughed, sitting down in the scanning chair. Though I have to admit, I'm just as curious as you are. Why do you think I can talk to you when others can't? Dawn activated her instruments, watching as colorful patterns appeared on the screens. Based on my research, my condition creates a kind of signal. It triggers an avoidance response in males of my species. Something in their brains tells them to look away, move away, forget I'm there. But human brains are different, James said, watching the displays with interest. Very different, Dawn agreed, her skin now bright yellow with discovery. Look at these patterns. Your neural pathways process social signals unlike anything I've seen. It's as if you're completely immune to the avoidance trigger. A noise in the corridor made them both jump. Dawn quickly dimmed the screens as a palace guard walked past the door. Once the footsteps faded, they both relaxed. You know, James said thoughtfully, on Earth, we have something similar. Some animals produce pheromones, chemical signals that affect behavior. But humans have lost most of our ability to detect them. Maybe that's why your signal doesn't work on us. Dawn's skin turned deep blue with sudden sadness. Do you think that's all it is? Your species is just blind to my defect. James stood up from the scanning chair and did something unprecedented. He gently touched her hand. Dawn's skin rippled with startled patterns of yellow and pink. I don't think it's a defect at all, he said quietly. Look at these readings. The signal you produce is too complex, too precise. It's like it was designed for something. But designed for what? Dawn asked, trying to focus on the science instead of the fact that a male was voluntarily touching her hand. What possible benefit could there be in making my own people avoid me? Before James could answer, the lab door slid open. Dr. Glow hurried in, her old face excited. Princess. Oh. And Officer Thompson. Good, you're both here. I've made a remarkable discovery about the princess's condition. But she stopped short, staring at their still joined hands. Her expression changed from excitement to deep thought. Actually, this might prove my theory even better than my research. Princess, have you noticed that the human's presence seems to be changing your signal? Dawn looked down at her skin, surprised to see it was glowing with a soft gold color she'd never made before. Changing. What do you mean? Dr. Glow's eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. I think, Your Highness, that your condition isn't about keeping males away. It's about finding the right ones whose minds are different enough to help our species evolve. Neither Dawn nor James knew how to respond to that, but their hands remained clasped as they waited for Dr. Glow to explain further. Lord Vale stood before the Council of Nobles, his scaled skin darkened with purpose. My fellow nobles, we cannot ignore what's happening in our palace. The human male spends hours alone with our princess. How do we know Earth isn't planning to take advantage of her condition? The council chamber erupted in whispers. Dawn watched from a hidden observation balcony, her skin deep gray with worry. She wasn't supposed to be here, but she needed to know what the nobles were plotting. The human diplomatic team has done nothing wrong, her father's voice boomed across the chamber. The emperor sat on his ceremonial chair, trying to maintain order. Lord Vale bowed slightly. With respect, Your Majesty, how can we trust creatures who don't even respond to proper biological signals? For all we know, they're planning to use the princess to infiltrate the royal family. After all, she's next in line for the throne. Dawn felt her skin turn dark blue with hurt. She'd known some nobles disapproved of her meetings with James, but she hadn't expected such a direct attack. Later that day, she met James in the palace gardens, one of the few places they could talk without drawing too much attention. The 3 moons were rising, casting multiple shadows through the crystal trees. The council meeting didn't go well, Dawn said, her skin still showing traces of blue. Lord Vale thinks you're trying to manipulate me. James sat on a crystal bench, looking troubled. Maybe we should stop our research sessions. I don't want to cause problems for you. No. Dawn's skin flashed bright red with determination. Dr. Glow is close to understanding why humans are different. Look at this. She handed him a datapad. James studied the screen. These are brain scans. Yes, yours, mine, and samples from my species. Dr. Glow found something strange. The signal I produce. It's not random. It's like a key looking for a specific lock. And human brains are that lock? James asked. Before Dawn could answer, they heard footsteps on the garden path. They quickly moved apart as Lord Vale appeared, flanked by 2 guards. Princess, he said, barely hiding his distaste. The council requests your presence, alone. He glanced at James with obvious disapproval. Dawn felt her skin ripple with patches of green anxiety, but she stood tall. Very well, Lord Vale. As she followed Vale through the palace corridors, Dawn noticed something odd. The guards were leading her away from the council chamber, toward the old wings of the palace. This isn't the way to the council, she said, stopping. Lord Vale turned, his expression cold. No, it isn't. The council didn't really send for you, Princess. But we need to keep you away from that human until we can convince your father that this foreign influence is too dangerous. Dawn's skin paled to almost white with fear, but she kept her voice steady. You're making a mistake, Lord Vale. The humans aren't a threat. They might be the key to understanding my condition. Your condition, Vale sneered, is proof that you should never take the throne. A ruler whom males can't even look at. It's against nature itself. Suddenly, James's voice came from behind them. Actually, it might be exactly what nature intended. Everyone turned to see James standing there with Dr. Glow, who held up a glowing datapad. Lord Vale, the old scientist said, we've made a breakthrough. The princess's condition isn't a defect. It's an evolutionary beacon, and the proof is in these readings. Dawn felt her skin begin to glow with that new golden color that only appeared around James. She realized that whatever Dr. Glow had discovered, it was about to change everything, if they could survive what Lord Vale might do next. Lord Vale's guards reached for their weapons, but Dr. Glow stepped forward, her old hand steady as she held up the datapad. Before you do anything foolish, you should see this. It's from the ancient archives. Dawn's skin shifted between gold and nervous green as Dr. Glow activated a holographic display. Ancient symbols floated in the air between them, casting strange shadows on the palace walls. These records, Dr. Glow explained, are over 10,000 years old. They tell of a time when our ancestors prepared for future contact with other worlds. They engineered certain bloodlines to produce special traits. Lord Vale's scales darkened with anger. What does this have to do with? A loud explosion cut him off, shaking the entire palace. Alarms began blaring throughout the corridors. Multiple breaches in the palace defenses. A voice announced over the emergency system. Unknown attackers have disabled our security grid. James immediately moved closer to Dawn. This isn't a coincidence. Someone planned this attack to happen now. Lord Vale's expression changed from anger to fear. The outer defense systems, they're linked to the royal bloodline. Without them, we're exposed to orbital attacks. More explosions rocked the building. Dawn stumbled, and both James and Lord Vale reached to steady her. To everyone's shock, Vale didn't pull away from her as usual. The signal, Dr. Glow whispered, checking her instruments. Princess, your signal is changing. The stress of the attack is triggering something. Dawn felt strange, like energy was flowing through her body. Her skin began to glow brighter than ever before, pulsing with waves of gold and silver light. For the first time in her life, she felt powerful, instead of isolated. The ancient records, Dr. Glow continued excitedly. They say certain members of the royal family were given the ability to identify true allies. The signal doesn't push males away. It pushes away those who aren't ready to connect with other species. Another explosion hit closer, and pieces of crystal fell from the ceiling. James grabbed Dawn's hand. That's fascinating, but right now we need to get to safety. The defense control room, Dawn said suddenly, her voice stronger than usual. I can feel it calling to me, like it's been waiting all this time. Lord Vale stared at her in amazement, no longer trying to avoid her presence. The attack, it's making you stronger. You're not pushing me away anymore. Because you're finally seeing her for who she really is, James said, understanding dawning in his eyes. The signal wasn't a defect. It was waiting for the right moment, the right crisis, to activate its true purpose. They ran through the shaking corridors, following Dawn's instincts. Her glowing skin lit their way as the palace's regular lights flickered and died. When they reached the ancient control room, Dawn placed her hand on the central crystal. It responded immediately, glowing with the same golden light as her skin. It's accepting her DNA, Dr. Glow said, checking her readings. But there's more. Princess, the system needs a second genetic signature, one that's completely different from our species. Dawn turned to James, her skin pulsing with waves of gold. That's why the signal led me to you. Humans aren't just immune to it. They're the key to unlocking our oldest defenses. Our ancestors knew that one day, we'd need to trust other species to survive. James took her other hand, and together they pressed their palms against the crystal. The room hummed with power as ancient machines came to life, ready to defend against the attack. But more than that, their joined hands proved that Dawn's lifelong isolation hadn't been a curse. It had been preparation for this exact moment. The real question was, would it be enough to save both their peoples from whatever enemy had chosen this moment to strike? The ancient control room hummed with power as Dawn and James kept their hands pressed against the central crystal. Holographic displays filled the air around them, showing the palace under attack from ships that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Those aren't our ships, Lord Vale said, his scales pale with shock. They're using technology we've never seen before. Dr. Glow worked frantically at a nearby console. The attackers somehow knew about our defenses. They must have been watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, Dawn's skin flashed bright red in warning. Someone's coming. I can feel them through the palace systems. The door burst open. A group of armed figures rushed in, led by someone Dawn recognized. Stone, one of Vale's most trusted advisors. His scales were dark with triumph as he aimed a weapon at them. Step away from the crystal, Stone commanded. Our allies are counting on us to disable the palace defenses. Allies? Lord Vale's voice shook with anger. You betrayed us to outsiders. Stone laughed coldly. We made a deal with a species that understands real power. They promised us technology beyond our dreams if we helped them take control. All we had to do was wait for the right moment, when the palace was distracted by these primitive humans. Dawn felt James's hand squeeze hers gently. Through their connection to the crystal, she could sense him forming a plan. The ancient systems were responding to both of them now, showing them possibilities they hadn't seen before. You're wrong about humans being primitive, Dawn said, her skin beginning to pulse with that powerful golden light again. Our ancestors knew something you don't. True strength comes from working together, not from trying to overpower others. Stone raised his weapon. Pretty words won't stop us. The princess who no one can bear to look at, trying to lecture us about working together. Step away from the crystal, or we'll make you. But something was happening. The golden light from Dawn's skin was spreading through the crystal networks that ran through the palace walls. Where it touched, ancient systems awakened. And as it reached the other nobles and guards in the room, something remarkable occurred. The males who had always been forced to look away from Dawn suddenly found they could see her clearly. It wasn't that her signal had stopped. Instead, It had transformed, becoming a bridge rather than a barrier. The ancient defense system, Dr. Glow gasped, checking her readings. It's not just about protecting the palace. It's about protecting our ability to connect with other species. That's why the princess's power had to wait for humans to arrive. Stone fired his weapon, but a shield of golden energy appeared, protecting Dawn and James. Through their connection to the crystal, they could feel the palace's full defense systems coming online. Above them, the attacking ships suddenly became visible, their cloaking technology disabled by energies they couldn't understand. "You see, Stone," Dawn said, her voice strong and clear, "my condition wasn't about pushing people away. It was about finding those who were ready to be true allies. Humans aren't primitive. They're exactly what our ancestors were waiting for." James added, "And your advanced allies didn't understand what they were really facing. They thought they were attacking a weakness in the palace defenses, but they were actually attacking at the exact moment when those defenses would be strongest." The golden energy spread further, disabling Stone's weapons and those of his conspirators. Palace guards who could now look directly at Dawn rushed in to arrest the traitors. Through the holographic displays, they could see the attacking ships being driven back by weapons that hadn't been used in 10,000 years. But this wasn't just a victory of technology. As Dawn stood there, glowing with power, no longer isolating males but bringing everyone together, she realized that her entire life had been preparing her for this moment. She wasn't just saving the palace. She was showing her people a new way forward. 1 month after the attack, the palace's grand hall looked very different. The crystal chandeliers now pulsed with gentle golden light, and the holographic displays showed images of Earth alongside maps of the stellar empire. But the biggest change was Princess Dawn herself, standing confidently among a mixed crowd of her people and humans, her skin glowing with warm, steady gold. "The ancient records were right," Dr. Glow announced to the gathered assembly. "Our ancestors knew that isolation would protect us until we were ready for true alliance." Princess Dawn's special ability wasn't a flaw. It was a gift, waiting for the right moment to evolve. The Emperor stood from his throne, looking prouder than ever. "Thanks to my daughter and our human allies, we not only defeated the attack, but discovered a new path forward. The technology that awakened in our ancient systems has already helped us make incredible advances." James stood nearby, wearing formal clothes that mixed human and alien styles. He smiled as Dawn's skin flickered briefly pink when she caught his eye. Their connection through the crystal had changed them both, creating a bridge between their species that others could now follow. Lord Vale stepped forward, his scales bright with sincerity. "I move that we officially recognize Princess Dawn's unique abilities as a sign of her fitness to rule. She has proven that pushing others away can sometimes be about waiting for the right ones to come closer." The crowd murmured in agreement. Where once the males of her species had unconsciously avoided her, now they could stand nearby, their minds open to new possibilities. Dawn's signal had transformed from a barrier into a bridge, helping everyone understand each other better. "We've received word from Earth," Ambassador White announced. "They're eager to begin fuller diplomatic relations. It seems humans and our people share more than we thought, especially our ability to adapt and grow." Dawn walked to the center of the hall, her golden glow reflecting off the crystal walls. "For years, I thought I was cursed to be alone. Now I understand that sometimes the universe makes us different for a reason. My isolation wasn't a punishment. It was preparation for bringing our peoples together." She held out her hand, and James joined her. Where their hands touched, a soft golden light pulsed, visible to everyone. The ancient defense systems hummed in harmony with their connection, showing that technology could unite as well as protect. "The attacked ships came from a species that believed in taking power," Dawn continued. "But our ancestors knew that real strength comes from working together. That's why they created my genetic line, not to rule through force, but to recognize true allies when they appeared." Dr. Glow added excitedly, "The princess's ability is already evolving. Instead of pushing males away, it now helps everyone understand each other better." The golden energy we see is actually a kind of universal translator, working at a level deeper than language. The Emperor raised his hands for silence. Today, we announce two things. First, Earth is officially recognized as our closest ally, with all the privileges that brings. And second, he smiled at his daughter. Princess Dawn will begin training to take the throne, with a special focus on interspecies relations. Dawn's skin rippled with patterns of joy as the crowd cheered. James squeezed her hand, and she felt the warmth of their connection spread through the crystal networks that linked the palace. Above them, through the crystal ceiling, they could see the three moons rising together, just as they had on that lonely evening that now felt so long ago. "You know," James said softly, "on Earth we have a saying, everything happens for a reason." Dawn's skin glowed brighter. Maybe that's something else our species have in common. The ability to turn loneliness into connection and isolation into strength. As the celebration continued around them, Dawn realized that her story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. She wasn't the princess that every male ignored anymore. She was the princess who had helped two species find a better way forward together.